Thank you. Welcome to It's a Wonderful Life, the live stream. I don't even know what to call it these days. I'm not really doing the kind of podcast thing, but
hi everyone.
That's
my apologies that my
autoplay is best friend of a streamer. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm here tonight with Last Things, who I'm sure you're all aware of already because he has a fantastic movie distant right live stream channel, conversations, movie reviews. It's all there. It's all very interesting. And we're tonight going to be talking about It's a Wonderful Life, one of my favorite films ever, and certainly part of a lot of people's Christmas routines, I think. So Last Things, what can you tell us about your film review, your film festival? The links are in the description, but I'm sure it'd be better coming from you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, Poe, thank you so much for having me on. I'm an admirer of your channel as well, so I'm glad that we're finally getting the opportunity to stream together. Poe and I thought about doing a movie. We discussed Porco Rosso, which I'm going to probably have you on my stream early next year to discuss. We just we're across the pond from one another, so our schedules didn't quite line up. But yeah, as Poe mentioned, you know, most of my video essays, I do a lot of interviews of folks in this space as well. But my video essays tend to kind of focus on a specific film or television program as a means of discussing some sort of philosophical idea, person, kind of current event, or just the zeitgeist in general. And so obviously I love films. One of the things that unfortunately starts to go first, or at least what went for me first, once one sort of has a kind of I always feel so cliche and tired to say red pilled moment, but once one has sort of a political awakening, or falls out of alignment, so to speak, with the culture, one of the first things to go is just being able to talk about movies with friends. You start feeling like every kind of cultural conversation is really just sort of an ideological purity test, or you can't necessarily speak your mind, or you know, best case scenario, you still are speaking freely with somebody, but it's like you watched two separate movies. And you know, that's what constituted. I'm a big film buff, and that's what constituted a lot of my just sort of chewing the cud with friends. And you know, over the years, since probably 2016, I lost a lot of friends in person for kind of political and cultural reasons, but I gained a lot of online friends, which is good and bad because you can kind of speak freely with those people, but at the end of the day, it is always kind of parasocial. You know, you can't give them a hug per se, or if you're lucky, maybe you get to see them in person once or twice a year. And so I kind of asked myself, what's the least parasocial activity I could be doing with all of these people that I've met online, or that I want to get to know more. And I thought, let's talk about movies. You know, and I should also mention, Poe, you know, I'm not the first sort of dissident film festival. And to clarify for the audience, this is a film festival of people talking about movies. So it's a film review festival. We're not, hopefully in a decade, we will have a dissident right film festival, because, you know, we'll all have teal bucks and there'll be dozens of, you know, dissident directors making masterpieces. But I think right now, the best that we can do is sort of hint for the secretly or accidentally based films. And or, you know, just deconstruct why a film is bad or propaganda or what have you. But yeah, there was someone else that did something like this. I always want to give credit. Guide to Culture, which is run by Frody Midjord. started a film festival that he called the Decameron Film Festival. He named it the Decameron because it was something that he started during COVID. And the Decameron, Boccaccio's Decameron, is a medieval text about a bunch of people that are trying to avoid the plague. I think they get caught in I think it's an abbey or something like that, and while avoiding the plague, and they all decide to tell one another stories. So he had the same idea. If I can't leave my house, I'll have people on and we'll review movies. So he's been doing that probably for 3 or 4 years now, which is great. And I reached out to him and was like, look, I think you've got the Cannes Film Festival of the E-Right. Would you mind terribly if I began the Sundance Festival? So, he usually does his festival in April. I'm doing mine usually at the end of the year, hence last picture shows. And yeah, so this is the first year that it happened. We clocked in at 40 film reviews, and it was a lot of fun. So I definitely plan to do it again in 2024. That's the long-winded version, Poe. Sorry.
Thanks very much. That's great. I'd love to get the background on that. And I certainly share a love of talking about films, which is why we're here and why I've talked about many films on this channel. I can't say that I quite necessarily see the link between politics and film that you often do. I do find myself, other than other people familiar with the name, ringing the bell a few times, I actually do find myself enjoying quite a lot of films and being able to kind of share that love with people in my life, even normies. I think that's where you and I differ, is seeing the politics in things. But in films like It's a Wonderful Life, it's I wanted to read this quote to get right into it. But once again, please go to the description and find the link to the Film Review Festival from Last Things. I think there's loads of films that I love on there, and I can't wait to listen to all the reviews. But to get
Paul, I should mention one last thing before we dive into our awesome Christmas movie. Second, maybe that's neck and neck with Die Hard for my favorite Christmas movie. But I should say, when I invited people to the film festival, I made it clear, this does not have to be somebody's political deconstruction of propaganda. I told people they could do a movie that they love for purely aesthetic reasons or personal reasons, a movie that they hate, just a movie that they have some kind of sentimentality for, or nostalgia. It didn't really matter. All that mattered to me was that felt like they could have kind of an interesting hour-long to 90-minute long conversation about it. So, and it's a really wide range of movies. There's kids films, there's films from the 50s, films from last year. So they kind of run the gamut of genre, era and perspective.
How many of them got included in that intro that we just watched?
That's a good question. Not 40. not all of them. That's maybe got
a lot of clips there.
Yeah. And a lot of foreign films, European films, and American films. So I was worried that it was just going to be 40 people wanting to review Fight Club and Conan the Barbarian, but luckily it was much more eclectic than that.
I'm trying to remember if you reviewed any anime. Did you get one anime film to review?
I did. We reviewed Attack on Titan.
Oh yeah, the TV show. Yeah.
And Memories from 1995, which is a Katsuhiro. It's 3 sort of short stories or short films that are all anime.
Well, I personally admire I think you were talking to Oren McIntyre about your film festival, was it last week, where you talked about finding the cope reading in it wasn't kind of death of the author, just ignore what the filmmaker was trying to say, because they're probably lefty, unless they're Mel Gibson or something, they're probably just trying to make a film about how we should all love each other or something lame like that. But you can usually find a take if it's a really good film. What Ernest Hemingway said about meaning, it's if you write the old man in the sea, and you write the old man really well, you write the young man really well, and you write the sea really well, then you've written something that's true, and you can find many true things in it, and you'll basically you'll find whatever meaning you need in your life from that story. That's what really good writing does, I think.
I agree. I agree. And there is there's that kind of writing, which is great. There's also I think it's kind of a lesser phenomenon, probably less worthy of commentary, but there's things that are just bad writing but accidentally say really profound things.
I guess is that harder to find, or is that just sort of accident, like broken clock being right twice a day kind of thing?
Well, unfortunately, I find that it gets easier and easier to find, and I mean, one could certainly probably easily just make the argument that just means I'm getting crankier, or I'm older and more cynical. But I don't know. I think there is some objective truth in just screenwriting going down. But I think I would agree with you and with Hemingway that the reason why that is going down is that because it's more overtly political. And if people were just focusing on telling a good story, a good narrative, that would solve a lot of the kind of ideological issues that people have with modern television and modern movies.
Yeah, I completely agree. Although, of course, I would like to see people on the right making films, in the way that you described earlier. Of course, I'd like to see that, but also just making beautiful films and making true stories that ring true would be a great start.
And Poe, you said a moment ago, what about some dumb movie about how everybody should just love one another? But we are about to talk about It's a Wonderful Life.
Well, okay,
which is a good movie about how everybody should just love one another.
So I made a video a few years ago about this film, again at Christmas time, and it was when I found out. Thank you. I found out that this film was reviewed by a panel led by Ayn Rand, the objectivist author and philosopher. Really? So it was investigated for being socialist propaganda or communist propaganda. And this, not specifically talking about this film, but I love this quote about the mission of this panel that were going through films. They stated this, which I thought was really interesting. The purpose of the communists in Hollywood is not the production of political movies openly advocating communism. Their purpose is to corrupt non-political movies by introducing small, casual bits of propaganda into innocent stories and to make people absorb the basic principles of collectivism by indirection and implication. Few people would take communism straight, but a constant stream of hints, lines, touches, and suggestions battering the public from the screen will act like drops of water that split a rock continued long enough. I thought that was a brilliant metaphor. It kind of does feel like that.
It could have been written yesterday, Poe.
Right? Yeah, like yesterday. Collectivism and communism is sort of spelt with a capital C, but the enemy is like the calls are coming from inside the house, like just change the name and now it's all accepted, right? We call it the American we call it Americanism, what was once the enemy of Americanism. That's what they were calling it at the time. The rock they are trying to split is Americanism, is the end of that the quote. Americanism is like, what a cheesy name for like everything that is right and good in the world. I don't know. You're American. I don't want to insult you, but that's definitely not what they would call it today.
We dropped the
liberalism,
ball.
I guess.
It's been a long time since the wholesome goodness of Jimmy Stewart. So don't be shy.
So I think this panel ultimately ruled that It's a Wonderful Life was not propaganda, or if it did rule that, it was overturned eventually. You can read the full story on Reddit or somewhere, but this article that I'm reading called from openculture.com. But it did kind of raise this interesting question of, is obviously there is a strong sense of community in Bedford Falls that comes together to support George Bailey, and he in turn is, it's in repayment for all of the service that he's done for his community. But watching it this time, I was struck by just how kind of what in cultural terms what we would call conservative, like not a political way, but the fact that George Bailey, he turns away from his individualism of going out, seeking the world and becoming this like really interesting explorer type person. Like he really wants to go and see the world. He doesn't want to settle down and get married, and he really just doesn't like Bedford Falls that much. And then he turns away from that out of duty and becomes kind of the hero of Bedford Falls in a kind of, I don't know, there's something really if not exactly conservative about it. It's very, it is, I mean, it is collectivist, which was I guess what they were worried about in the socialism panel. But I wonder what's your take if you had to sum up, what would you know, intended or not intended, what do you think is the message of It's a Wonderful Life?
Well, I think it's probably, quite frankly, just more of a Christian message, which is neither capitalist nor communist, and something that is probably guaranteed to ruffle either feather, a communist feather or a capitalist feather. I can kind of understand if you squint, and you're like on HUAC or some sort of committee that's dedicated to rooting out communists, how this might be easy prey, especially because of the villain. I can't recall the name of the larger, Potter. I mean, Potter, I think, is the easiest way to understand that angle, because he's a bit of this caricature of like this really greedy, kind of loathsome, quote unquote capitalist, end quote. But I don't think that just the fact that character exists is enough to paint the film as communist. And I did know, and I watched your video, Poe, and I'm curious because you mentioned, it was years ago when you did it, and your thoughts may have changed. So we should discuss that if you feel really differently about the movie. But I knew that this was something that had been investigated. I did not know that Ayn Rand was involved in the investigation. And that's fascinating, because I think part of what would annoy Ayn Rand about this, more so that, and she might even have told herself, she hates it because of these, quote unquote communist elements. But I think that George Bailey is sort of the antithesis of a Randian hero. Like even if you were, I think she was probably personally offended by this movie, because he wants to go and be an architect. Like he's going to be a internationally he wants to be Frank Lloyd Wright. And Ayn Rand wrote her books about Frank Lloyd Wright, like her John Galt, right? Her protagonists are these highly individualistic, highly successful, kind of, Ubermenschen, who do not sacrifice themselves for anyone, much less their hometown and their community. So I can certainly see how this directly offends all of like objectivism.
You're completely right.
That might have been what was motivating Ayn Rand's hand more than any sort of broadside against quote unquote capital C capitalism.
Americanism is what they called it. But
right.
From Ayn Rand's perspective, once you started talking about it, I knew I wanted to get this guy on the screen, because I can't remember if I talked about it in the video. I find it so embarrassing watching old videos. I don't even watch them. I'd really make them all private if I had the guts to. But I feel like there's some people out there who still would find those videos interesting and useful. So for their benefit, I don't delete them. Anyway, back then, I probably thought this guy was the villain. This is George Bailey's uncle, who loses the money in the first place, which is the catalyst for the downfall that leads to George Bailey's redemption. But he loses, what is it, £8,000? $800?
Yeah.
Like that.
$8,000. That's a lot back in like the 50s.
Yeah, it was, yeah. So $8,000 in an envelope. He just flat out loses it on the way to the bank. And he's just this like really incompetent, like he should not be working for George Bailey. He's got like squirrels in his house and all kinds of pets. And he's just like the kind of scatterbrained fool.
He's like Dr. Doolittle.
He's like well-meaning, but like really, do you want this guy doing the deposit, like doing the bank run? Like hiring incompetent people like this it was George Bailey's like greatest mistake. Although of course it did lead to a wonderful film happening. I think this guy really gets off quite lightly. Although but George does shout at him rather a lot, and he really deserves that. But I think from Ayn Rand's perspective, like Potter isn't the bad guy. This is the bad guy, like absolutely. This is the guy who causes the downfall of George. So that was probably my like 2018 take. Whenever I made that film, was like this is the bad guy. But I think he barely even appears in the rest after getting shouted at by George.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, he probably reminded her of her husband, who was that script writer who, I forget his name. He wrote McTeague. I can Google it right now. But I mean, she famously wound up having to kind of take care of him. Frank Norris. That's right.
Really?
As he,
I
think he wound up suffering from dementia, and she, had numerous affairs on him, and was kind of a bumbling figure, similar to that, the uncle that she just, I think, resented having to care for.
Yeah, I guess she'd be pretty happy with today, when you can just get divorced if your husband has dementia. You can just leave him at home and just divorce him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got a few clips here, but I guess I really like your idea of it being a Christian film above anything else. That the first scene, when you're watching this on a rewatch, which I think most people do, but most people watching it are not watching it for the first time. The very first scene, the first shot of this, I think it's just external shots of Bedford Falls and voiceover of people praying for George. I find that really touching, and you really wouldn't get anything that much of Christianity just like smeared on a film like that. That makes it sound bad, like slathered on like thick onto this film. Like the angel that George comes, it's like explicitly a Christian angel sent by the Christian God. It's really unlike anything you'd see in a modern film.
Well, it's it's funny because this is a refrain that many people mentioned during the film festival, regardless of the film, is, quote, "It couldn't have been made today." Right.
Yeah, I didn't mean to be so cliche, but you're right.
The film couldn't have been made today because of the overtly Christian themes, but it also couldn't be made today, at least, it could not be made, like, it could not be situated in the here and now, because the idea of like a local economy that is kept afloat by a local loan, loan officer, or banker, so to speak, is completely alien at this point. Like the kind of America, the kind of localism and regionalism and just sort of that small town that can kind of feed and take care of itself is completely gone from the American landscape, from the American imagination. I think if, I know you watched it with your kids. My kids are still a little young to get it, but I can imagine watching this with like a teenager and them being like, "Dad, what are they talking about that like he helps the town? Where's the Walmart?" Or like, it's just, it can't, there's nothing left for George Bailey to defend at this point. There are no George Baileys anymore, sadly.
Yeah, you just go online and you like Google like best loan rates, or you get some app that gives you a mortgage or a loan for your payday loan or something.
Yeah, I mean, something that it's funny, when you rewatch It's a Wonderful Life, it puts you in mind of like much lesser, more cloying Christmas movies, but it made me think of like Chevy Chase's Christmas Vacation, which is like a classic, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. And the big, I mean, he's sort of this George Bailey character, but the big sort of, crisis of the film is that like his corporation has withheld the Christmas bonuses, and he needed that money to buy his family all of their gifts. And that's like, that's the closest you get to a George Bailey, is like an American, father and husband who did not get enough dispensation from his corporate office to buy a bunch of plastic for his children. It's just sad.
Yeah, it's something very charming about the film. I don't know if modern audiences do get it. I kind of want to watch one of those YouTube videos, like Zoomers watching It's a Wonderful Life for the first time. Are you aware of a reaction channel called Popcorn in Bed?
Popcorn in Bed. No.
Yeah, it's I think ex-Mormon, or maybe she's still Mormon. Like a really just delightful blonde lady who's she's really kind of naive, and she started the channel where she had no film knowledge at all. Like because she was raised Mormon, she didn't get any exposure to film, and certainly
Lucky
not
her.
anything beyond like family films. So I guess she and her husband have this channel. I think he's like doing the editing and sort of organizing it, and so she just sits down and watches these films. But It's Wonderful Life was a great episode because she's you have to watch it to get it, but she has a reaction channel for a reason, right? She's got these really adorable kind of like she has like emotional reactions to things happening in the film, and even before the main drama has started, she's already like really highly highly interested, like highly strong. Like the scene where they like the bank run, I think that's like where the film really starts to like hit the ground running.
Yeah.
Where it actually it like really picks up the pace. Is the people all going into the bank and they're withdrawing all of their savings, and they go, "Oh no, your money's not here; it's in Bill's house and Tom's house."
Wow! Oh, that was a pretty good Jimmy Stewart. That was a pretty good Jimmy Stewart.
I'll have to do that some more. It's a great scene, but like she was like close to tears during that scene, and I was just like really like looking forward to like I knew she was not emotionally ready for the rest of the film. It does still resonate with at least some modern audiences, I think.
I was really nervous because I was watching a few reaction movies or reaction channels. One of the guys from your side of the Atlantic, Critical Drinker, who I enjoy watching on occasion, and he had it actually. I think it got recommended to me because I had just watched your old film on it. But before I clicked play, I was just so nervous because I was like, "Oh no, Critical Drinker's not gonna he's not gonna rail against It's a Wonderful Life," but he's a total softie for the movie. He loved it. He had nothing. He just lathered praise on it. So I was so glad that I think even the most hardened. I mean, he says that I think his exact line was this film pierces my blackened heart. So even Critical Drinker cannot become so cynical as to not enjoy It's a Wonderful Life.
Well, I think he is doing a character as well.
Yeah.
I think I often when films go for that really sentimental note, it kind of falls flat because it's expecting so much of the audience to react to this. I think it really is quite brave for a film to try and pull this off with and really just like pile it on right there at the end with where everything starts to go right for George, and the angel gets its wings thing that's so corny, but it's in the moment it's just so delightful. It all works, I think.
It's funny because like most, this is one of the things that's so terrible about like modern Christmas movies is that like whenever modern Christmas movies have to deal with like the metaphysics or like there's some sort of magical realist or supernatural element to a Christmas movie, the only question it's trying to answer or like the only question it's trying to skirt around is how does Santa get to all the houses in one night? And it's nice to have a Christmas film that does not like, the metaphysics are Christian and not like some sort of quantum explanation of how Santa can stop space-time to deliver presents to kids. Another thing that is interesting about it, and I don't know if I imagine somebody else has said this, so forgive me if I'm saying the most obvious. I have the most obvious observation of all time, but it's really it's sort of a reversal or an antithesis of A Christmas Carol of Ebenezer Scrooge.
I was going to bring that up next, actually.
Oh, cool. Well, then I'll wait. Go
ahead.
Pause. Well, it's probably. I mean, having said it, I think people can probably fill in the blanks. But Scrooge is this kind of narcissistic, selfish miser who's done nothing for anybody his entire life, and but is still very kind of wealthy and well off, and he's visited by spirits who have to kind of rub his nose in the dirt, so to speak, and get him to repent for his evil ways, and he sort of ends the film as seeking redemption. Whereas with It's a Wonderful Life, you have a protagonist with George who is good, sacrificing, altruistic, but has nonetheless feels that he's a failure. He's on the brink of suicide. He's sort of at a nadir of his life, whereas Scrooge is just sort of quite wealthy and just self-satisfied. So it's kind of this, they have very reverse polarities or very different trajectories, the two heroes. And they're both visited by these, there's the ghost of Christmas, the spirits of Christmas that visit Ebenezer Scrooge, and the angel who visits our protagonist. But yeah, there's a lot of, I imagine that the screenwriter had that in mind when they made it. I've never read up on it, but it has to be the case.
I also thought that. And this time when I watched it, I noticed in the credits at the start, if you actually watch through all those title cards that everyone skips through these days, because why wouldn't you? You can see it says based on a novel by Charles Dickens, which I'm guessing can only be A Christmas Carol, which really surprised me. It's like, it's almost as if, because Dickens had come up with the idea of a Christmas story where spirits visit a man and show him a version of not the future, but his life, where things are different. That means that, like, they have to give Charles Dickens credit because that idea was so new. Like, it wasn't yet like worn into the ground, I guess. Idea of just like, it's just it's a spirit, he's there to help you and show you things about your life. Like that. Yeah. The film, I think in many people's minds, and certainly in mine until I saw that like title card coming up, they're not really related at all, because George is so unlike Scrooge. He has one bad day. So Scrooge is bad his whole life and feels no guilt at all until the spirit comes to show him. George is bad for one day, and he shouts at his kids and his wife, and he like loses some money and he might go to jail. And he shouts at his kid's teacher, and he gets punched and he crashes his car. Like, so it's a really bad day. But like, that's enough to make him feel so, all this money that he's lost is enough to make him feel so bad. And his brother's coming home too, his like war hero brother coming back to like show this like stark contrast between the two guys. Like, that's enough to make him want to kill himself. Compared to, I don't know if I'm gonna get I think the censorship on YouTube is only if you care about being demonetized, so I guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I've never paid much mind to it. I wouldn't worry. I guess it is obvious.
Yeah, it's not that obvious. I think most people don't make that connection. I think because it's almost become a staple of films and Christmas films and things like Click. You ever seen that like Adam Sandler film was kind of like an It's a Wonderful Life thing?
Yeah.
Or I mean, it's not until the part where it is, but it's almost like audiences are just used to the idea that a spirit, like an anthropomorphized spirit, can just arrive and give you some life lessons. that's become like just normal, and you don't need to give credit to Charles Dickens. But I guess it was for his audience, that was a completely new idea. And it is kind of odd that Charles Dickens didn't go to kind of Christian mythology at all, considering it's Christmas and it's the birth of Christ. He doesn't really. Yeah. It's not really like explicitly Christian. It's kind of it's almost pagan, the way that it's like the spirit of Christmas.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well. Maybe it is worth noting that like an angel is sent to save a good man who's down on his luck, but these more kind of like pagan spirits are sent to haunt. Really, I mean, that's what they're really doing with Scrooge, is haunting him into being a good man. So, I think, Bailey has a like a fairy godfather of sorts, or just like a.
Why didn't Clarence go to the angel? Clarence should have gone to Potter and told him to loan George the money. That's what the Christmas Carol version of this. You got the exact same film, and it's just, instead of George Bailey seeing his life, it's Potter being showed around George's life, saying, "Like, look at what you're doing to this poor man. but it's almost like this is even. I don't know if this is an even better kind of message than a bad man turning good is a good man bringing in all of the benefits, that all of the accrued sort of social credit that he's accrued over a lifetime of being in this community and serving this community. He's now reaping the reward of it. That's almost more uplifting than the idea that this man could become good for like the last few years of his life and start doing good things. And I love A Christmas Carol, but this is almost it's different, and it is more uplifting, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It would be interesting if like Potter was, simultaneously Potter was being like tortured by 3 devils while Bailey's being
at the same night
saved by an angel. They need to get there. The angels are trying to earn their bat wings, or the devils are trying to earn their bat wings by just
you mean like the screw tape letters?
Yeah, exactly.
I guess maybe not quite. Yeah. Just while it's on my mind, I have my husband and I have been preparing for a live stream the coming weeks, probably next week, of ranking every adaptation of A Christmas Carol, and I'm talking like,
wow,
not everyone. There's too many. There's so many adaptations of it, like TV, parody, film adaptations.
I can tell you the best one.
I love this Christmas Carol.
100%, yeah. 110%.
Well, we'll see. You better tune in and find out if you'll. But we watched so many weird ones that I wasn't even familiar with. Yes, the Scrooge McDuck and the what is that show called? The DuckTales and the Blackadder Christmas Carol for British viewers, and there's one with Guy Pearce. The guy from Memento is Scrooge, and it's a really gritty, realistic version where he has autism, basically, like high functioning, like highly intellectual autistic man. I'm not aware of it at all, but we've watched perhaps 12 at this point. We're planning to watch
the Bill Murray one too.
Yeah, Scrooged. Yeah. So we were just like debating, like, should we include It's a Wonderful Life? Should we include Click? Like, how far do we go down? It's such an influential story that it's got all these adaptations, but it's also had a lot of things that are inspired by it. But I think we're sticking to stories that have like an actual script. Or we watched Ghosts of Girlfriends Past with Matthew McConaughey. I wasn't aware of that one.
I didn't. I mean, wow, that must have been before he, hit it big with True Detective or something.
Yeah, so he was a rom-com guy for a while, I guess, because he was kind of handsome and smooth talking. He had that was his typecast for a little while until he got onto, I'm trying like Wolf of Wall Street and True Detective, or probably when he became like a kind of dramatic actor, I think.
Yeah. I think that The Muppet Christmas Carol is the best adaptation because, again, not a new observation, but Michael Caine just plays it so straight that you forget that he's acting with Muppets. Like he's giving an Oscar-worthy performance, like while talking to Kermit the Frog, and you have to hand it to the man that he was able to like bring that much like intensity while performing with puppets.
Something interesting about the modern adaptations, they did it a little bit with Muppets Christmas Carol, where at the end when he's doing nice things, he raises Cratchit's salary, and he doesn't. I think he says like he doubles it, but he doesn't double it in the book. He just raises it. So it's kind of like there's a lot of adaptations that think they can do better than Dickens, where they change random things to make it kind of tie in better as a story, but you're competing with like one of the greatest storytellers of all time. So it's not that it's necessarily worse, but I kind of think like the audacity, like why did you?
Yeah.
Muppets Christmas Carol gets a pass. Like it doesn't do too much of that, but it also has to incorporate Muppets into the universe. I'm going to talk about this way more on the stream with Christmas Carol, but it's funny like as you get more modern.
Your Christmas Carol stream, yeah.
Oh yeah, it sounds like you're excited for it. So I hope it's one of those things like talking to you about It's Wonderful Life. I almost don't care if anyone watches it because I'm so excited to talk about these films. I just have a good time good time with it. So watch it or don't. I don't even mind.
I wish I recorded most of my film reviews in October and November, so nobody picked Christmas films. But then I released them on December 1st, and immediately I was like, oh, why didn't nobody want to? What nobody wanted to talk about Die Hard or It's a Wonderful Life? But that's why we are here now, Poe, discussing It's a Wonderful Life.
So we've only been doing for 40 minutes, but I feel that we kind of have rinsed the political messaging of It's a Wonderful Life. Obviously, what I've got on the screen is when he looks at his grave, which is probably the most similar that it gets to. I think he's looking at his brother's grave because he saved his brother's life when they were kids. And the title of this clip is "Each Man's Life Touches So Many Others," which is definitely true in George's case. I don't know if you could say this for every single person on Earth, but it's a story about an extraordinary person who deserves his own angel to come and talk to him.
Yes,
and help him out. So it is an interesting inversion that he's looking at his brother's grave instead of his own.
Another inversion with A Christmas Carol, absolutely.
So what have we not covered? What have we not said about this film that needs saying? I mean, it's I would say it kind of drags in the first 15 minutes, but you're just seeing him grow up, and they're kind of mildly interesting scenes, but it doesn't pick up momentum, like I said, until that bank run scene, which I think really that's from there to the end, it's like a non-stop roller coaster. Like I love every scene in that. Yeah,
I mean, I think I would just take a little bit of time to commend Jimmy Stewart in his performance. This is probably what he's maybe most remembered for. And I think it's maybe one of his best performances. I love him. I love him in Rear Window. I love him in all of the Hitchcocks, but this is maybe his most nuanced performance of his career. So I think he's fantastic. I don't know who else could have pulled this off. Really,
it's really upsetting seeing him shout at his family. And we've all been there. Maybe it's like that kind of. Like seeing myself in George is what makes it so painful, but it is like this really like sweet, sincere guy. You really forgive him for when he goes off the handle and loses his temper, because you really like it's writing and it's acting as well. This like how do you have a guy shouting at his wife without him looking like a real bastard, right? But it works.
Yeah, and I think it works too, just because it's Jimmy Stewart, and you're like, oh, Jimmy, how could you?
It's kind of like you're there. It's almost like you're there with him, like how much he's hating himself for it.
Yeah,
it just makes you feel bad for him and for his family as well. But maybe worse for him.
It's interesting. Go right ahead. Are we going to do the clip though?
No, I just did that by accident when I was trying to find a frame. I actually don't know what. So. It's a Wonderful Life is out of copyright, which is why it gets played so much on television. I found out recently. But I don't know if that means that this stream is going to be immune from copyright strikes if I play clips from the film. You're probably more familiar with that than me. And in your video essays, you use clips, but you not with audio. Is that about right?
I think there's. I'm actually, Poe. I'm actually completely ignorant on this. It's one. I think we both maybe just enjoy the fact that this is not a career. This is not like stuff we earn money on. So I can ignore the like ever shifting and evolving requirements for demonetization. I think that there's a limit. There's like a time limit. If you can use X minutes, if it's for purposes of criticism or something like that. But if you go longer than a certain, it might be 30 seconds, it might be 2 minutes. I have no idea, but something like that.
This entire scene, I mean, like this entire film, obviously you could just, I could rave about the how sort of emotionally resonant it is. But this whole scene at his house, he goes up and down with how frustrated he is with his family. So I find it really heartbreaking when he first walks in and he like just holds his son to him, but he's really like letting it out, like how upset he is that he might be going to prison soon. And he just wants to, he's not actually mad at his kid for being quite irritating.
Yeah.
He just kind of wants to hold him. And then he's like shouting at the teacher, and he goes around the house, and then he goes upstairs and has this cute little scene with Zuzu. Almost like the rest of his family has just witnessed like what a bad mood he's in. But when he comes into this room and he sees his little daughter, she is completely unaware of everything that's just happened before. So he gets to sort of just let himself sort of settle back into just being in the moment with her in a really sweet way. And she the petals fall off her flower, and then he pretends to stick them back on. And then he goes back downstairs and gets mad again. Like he gets frustrated again later. But it's it's a real ride, this whole thing. And then of course, like the end when he finds the petals in his pocket to it's like good screenwriting is when you can show and don't tell. You've got these you tie back to something that happened earlier. It just makes something in people's brains just like really, really happy. Makes it think you're really enjoying a really good film.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great too that as you said, it shows these kind of ups and downs and these ebbs and flows of his mood with his family. Because I think again, a lesser film would have just kind of been like, okay, well, this is the point where he is losing Bailey's just losing his mind, so he's just gonna be belligerent the entire time with every member of his family. But it's much more nuanced than that. As every parent knows, but it's great that it maintains that subtlety even as you're kind of entering this, decline in Bagby's, within the plot line.
Yeah, it's just coming back again to what you said about it being great performance and great writing as well. So this was directed by Frank Capra. Did he write the screenplay as well? I'm asking you. I was supposed to be prepared with this stream, but I
screenplay was by Francis Goodrich, Albert Hackett, and Frank Capra. So he had part. He's credited with the screenplay.
But correct me if I'm wrong. Neither of those minds is credited as being like one of the greats, like having a great portfolio of brilliant work. Have I?
No. Capra's. I don't even recognize either of those names, quite honestly. I think Frank Capra's the real star within that.
Yeah, I read Roger Ebert's review of this film. I don't actually know when he reviewed it because he's been reviewing films for so long. So he wrote this in 1999, and he commented about the colorized version. Are you familiar with the fact that this film was colorized?
No.
I didn't know that either, but he said that for a while that was the preferred version for television. And both James Stewart and Frank Capra said that it was it just looked terrible. So there were a few other films that were named in here. I'm trying to remember how they were tied in. Now is not the time to be researching this this film. Really, I should have done that before the stream started.
I think he. It's interesting. I was just looking up Frank Capra right now, and he. It's funny, and it makes it just more ironic that this film got targeted because he was a conservative Republican. He railed against Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He actively campaigned against his presidency, and if there's ever a president that's been accused of being our communist president, it was FDR. And his religious views, he said that he considered himself a quote unquote Christmas Catholic, but in his later years he returned to the Catholic Church and described himself as Catholic in spirit and one who firmly believes that the anti-moral, the intellectual bigots, and the mafias of ill will may destroy religion, but they will never conquer the cross. So I think that, that to me provides a bit of an explanation as to why that we have some of those Christian themes in his movies.
Okay, so it happened one night.
If that wasn't the only time he's tangled with Ayn Rand, because I do feel like there's a lot of kind of, I don't know, anti-objectivist sentiments in a lot of Frank Capra that I've seen. I'll have to look into that.
how much do you think? I mean, Ayn Rand must have had a little bit of clout. I mean, she has a lot of clout these days. People have read her books, and even if they don't describe the exact tenets of objectivism, I do wonder, kind of how, coming back to what we were saying at the start of the stream about the difference between collectivism and objectivism, like what is, I think a lot of people look at It's a Wonderful Life and would say that is a much more American product than The Fountainhead or the, she's not American for one thing.
Right.
But from the rest of the world's perspective, America is viewed as I think, like strongly individual, or sort of libertarian, objectivist flavored kind of politics. Your healthcare and your your short maternity leave and your your what do you call it? Yeah, just the Gibbs.
Right. Yeah.
As much as it, I don't know what the minimum wage compares to other countries, but I think that's the reputation that Americans have, is being the most capitalistic sort of modern society. And I wonder, like, what is more true to the spirit of Americanism as it stands today, or as it was back then? Is it the objectivist or the collective? Is it the objectivism of Ayn Rand and The Fountainhead, or is it George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life? And what? I wonder if, certainly, like you said, it seems really hard to watch this and believe that something like this could happen to a man now. I don't know if it ever was a believable, not the angel part, but the idea that people would like pray for you if you can't, if they found out that you were in trouble and that you owed money, that they'd be praying for you and giving you their money is perhaps always going to be unrealistic, but at least could be considered in keeping with the spirit of the country or the society, at least.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't say I really side with either camp if we're just kind of talking about, the quintessential American kind of nature. I mean, they're both immigrants, Ayn Rand and Frank Capra. Frank Capra was Italian and Catholic and emigrated to America. And so I think they're both kind of bringing their own sensibilities in a way and kind of trying to graft those on to the American landscape, for better or worse. I guess I'm a bit more sympathetic with Capra's presuppositions in that regard. But it's interesting thinking about Jimmy Stewart in relation to Ayn Rand too. Like another film that he's in, which is a Hitchcock movie called Rope, which is based on an actual murder case, but he's a teacher whose two students commit murder, but they do it to sort of achieve this kind of they want to. It's like a kind of a Raskolnikov Crime and Punishment like scenario where they want to prove that they can sort of stand above moral, traditional morals, and they're going to go off and be great men. But Jimmy Stewart in that movie kind of serves as the voice of moral reason. And I've always thought that film was, I mean, obviously it's indebted to Nietzsche, but there's a lot of Ayn Rand elements to it as well. So yeah, I wonder if there are any quotes about Jimmy Stewart or Frank Capra commenting on the influence of Ayn Rand, especially just as it when it comes to American storytelling or American cinema. Be interesting to learn about that.
I think the books are very influential, especially on Americans. I get that feeling. I don't know if that's really based on anything, except that I've heard a lot of men especially saying that they read Rand as an adolescent or as a young adult, as a kind of, even if they didn't land on objectivism as a worldview, they still found that very influential at a certain point in their life and probably carried remnants of it, even if they later became filmmakers and complete liberals.
That's funny, Poe, because I know so many men as well. And I never encountered or picked up any Ayn Rand as a teenager. And I'm just so curious. Like I want the It's a Wonderful Life movie of my life to be like, this is what would have happened if you'd read The Fountainhead when you were 15, and see what would have happened. But I mean, a lot of people I meet in this space, they say, yeah, well, I went through a libertarian phase from about 18 to 27 because I read Atlas Shrugged, and then hit reality at some point. The people either become a communist for a decade and then hit reality, or they become an objectivist for a decade. And I think it just has to do with whether your English teacher in high school gave you the Communist Manifesto or Atlas Shrugged, and then that decides in which direction you will be wayward as a young man until you finally kind of land somewhere more grounded.
Well, while we're on an Ayn Rand tangent, I'll say that I kind of did a I don't know what you call it, like a slalom between everything. So when I was in maybe secondary school, when I first heard about communism as a 2-line description, it kind of sounded good, right? Not having being upholden to capitalism, and your worth as a human being being sort of defined by how much money you can make to pay for basically being alive. All of that, all the fact that there are a lot of poor people in the world through no fault of their own, it all sounded very unfair. So I kind of de facto started to think of myself as kind of communist until I started to, I don't even know where the feeling came from, but I think that perhaps that wasn't right for some reason. If it really works, why hasn't it been tried? Why aren't we doing it if it really is that simple? So I went to Ayn Rand as a way to learn more about the criticisms of communism. So I guess I get to be extra special because I did both.
Yeah. yeah. Maybe some people just kind of have to oscillate back and forth a bit.
I think many people argue that your political opinions are mostly kind of biological anyway. You have a kind of predisposition, sort of what moral, the moral, what are they called? Jonathan Haidt's book, the moral foundations are kind of baked into you. Mm-hmm. And even if what we now call a conservative is would be radically liberal 30 years ago, it doesn't really matter because it's just a kind of direction that you're pulled in. So whatever environment that your little brain finds itself dropped into, you'll be either pulled towards changing things radically, or even just when you're young compared to when you're old, compared to wanting to being more nostalgic and preserve what there is already, and being a little bit more cautious would predispose you to being more conservative, which is all to say that maybe the route that you take to your final sort of opinions are, your final your true political compass is, it's all just it's all just finding your way there, and you would find your way there eventually, no matter which way you took to get there.
Yeah, I am I'm kind of familiar with Jonathan Haidt and The Righteous Mind and that kind of take, which I guess I have some issues with. That's probably a topic for a whole nother live stream, but I think right. I guess to tie it all back into It's a Wonderful Life, I think it is interesting that this was brought before the Anti-Communist Committee, or maybe I'm sure it also has some great capitalist defenders, that it's it's actually a capitalist film, it's a communist film. But I actually think that this film kind of part of the beauty of it, insofar as you can kind of talk about a movie's politics while talking about its beauty, is its sort of its moral pragmatism. George Bailey, our protagonist, is not. I mean, I guess he maybe starts out, as I mentioned, there's these hints that he wants to be this, Randian, heroic, figure, but it's not like he's swept up in. It's not like it's a clear ideology that has him stay in town, or it was even necessarily a clear ideology that was compelling him out of the town. It's just sort of this instinctual moral compass that he has, which I think we could call Christian, but it's not something that is beholden to any specific ideology. It's about his individual moral choices, the whole film.
Yeah, that's a good point. When you get into like politics on, you know, online or just in general, I think it can be really easy to let yourself fall into, you know, people's political leanings being the same as their like moral framework, when really you can be a good person or a bad person and have whatever political beliefs, because really that's just, you know, who you're voting for and which films you think are cringe.
Yeah.
when you know, that's for most people who aren't politically, you know, campaigning, or they're not politicians, that what they actually do in the world is much more important than the philosophers they read.
Yeah, I think it's the same movie whether or not you learn that, you know, George is a Democrat or a Republican. I don't think it matters. But it is a beautiful movie.
Yeah. Well, I think there'll be we took a few interesting tangents, but yeah, I think I said everything I wanted to say about George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life. Although certainly could probably talk about. I think I could dissect every scene in this film and have something to rave about. But probably the best way to experience it is just to watch it, and I think most people have seen it, so it would be enjoyable for me, but probably a waste of my breath. And it's the Christmas season; we should be with our families, so I'll let you and the viewers all get back to preparing I don't know what you do, like preparing your Christmas puddings and your buying presents on Amazon to arrive next day.
Yeah.
And this is just another reminder, please, everyone, go and get the tickets to the Film Review Festival. There's a link in the description for that. And look out for the Christmas Carol live stream that I'm going to be doing with my husband in, I think, next week. Last things, is there any last things you'd like to say?
Yeah, I should have. That it wasn't even part of why I named my channel that, but that's clever. If people haven't seen it, then absolutely, this is the perfect Christmas film. As we've said, I'm sure Poe and I have convinced you to go and watch it. And Poe, I'm going to have you on my stream probably January. So sorry I couldn't fit you in the festival this year, but next year we'll definitely have you involved. And it was a pleasure getting to chat.
You too. Thanks everyone so much for watching, and have a very Merry Christmas if I don't see you before then. Have a good one, everyone.